So this panel is talking about the data that nonprofits collect and how they're sharing it out with donors and showing effectiveness. You know, every nonprofit is collecting a lot of data, but not communicating it well. And so there's a clear problem here by the lack of show of hands and, you know, not even receiving those reports. So with us, we have 3 panelists who are, you know, working to solve this problem with kind of real-time online reporting. So first, to my left here is Ned Breslin from Water for People. Ned joined Water for People as its Director of International Programs in January 2006. After working for close to 20 years on water and sanitation development in Africa, he was appointed the organization's CEO in 2009. And Water for People is developing Reimagining Reporting, an online reporting platform with EffectiveUI. And speaking of EffectiveUI, we also have with us Rebecca Flavin. She is CEO at EffectiveUI, where she is responsible for the company's overall vision, user experience innovation, core values, and strategic direction. And on the end, we have Eric Stowe of Splash. Since founding Splash in 2006, Eric has developed a model to ensure safe water for urban children living at the intersection of the greatest degree of poverty and the worst water quality conditions. And Splash has an online reporting platform as well, proving it, that shows details of each water project they're involved in. So Ned, if you want to talk a little bit about the problem and what you're doing to solve it.
Sure. Thanks so much. So if you look across the kind of nonprofit space, a couple things are happening in terms of data. So one is, in the water sector, one is there's an argument about we don't have the right indicators and we're not really sure until we get that whether we should be tracking things. And so there's some resistance to tracking programs over time. The second is the kind of other extreme is kind of, I'm going to just vomit all my data out onto a map. I'm going to stick up a whole bunch of little pins. You're going to see where projects are and all that stuff, but I'm not really sure what it's telling you. And so the whole aid transparency movement and everything is around getting information out and getting it usable and making it more effective, and people can coordinate more and all that. But the way it's happening, we think, is not working particularly well. So we developed a 30-second video called Data Puke. I can't kind of get any credit for that. I actually heard it from the Midyar Foundation. But let's see if we can roll it, because I think this is the problem with the kind of overload of data. Do we have that first video? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with an alternative to this, where you're not just throwing up kind of unprocessed, unanalyzed data, but you actually try to make sense of the information that you have. And that's what we sort of developed with EffectiveUI. Splash has been doing a lot of that work as well.
So what are the steps that you're taking then to make sure that that data is useful? What are the kind of storytelling steps and analysis steps with Reimagined Reporting that you're taking now so that donors and other organizations will kind of understand what you're doing and how it's being effective?
So what we did as an organization is we sat back and we said, everyone hates reporting. Everyone in the nonprofit sector hates reporting. Donors actually hate it. NGOs hate it. Everyone complains about it. And it's actually quite a narrow thing. So it's, if you give me $1 million, I'm going to give you back a bunch of financial statistics, a bunch of financials and a whole bunch of things that hopefully justify the use of that $1 million, and then you're going to do it up the line. But it doesn't really help anybody, and it certainly doesn't help us very much. So we decided to recapture and re-own reporting and see if we could sort of blow it up. Because again, we'd heard over and over again how it's not really helping. So we did a couple things. One is we went around the world and talked to our staff and partners and said, how do you learn? How do you actually learn? And we never heard anywhere in the world, we work in 10 countries in the world, Latin America, Africa, and Asia, never heard anyone say we learn by reading a 60-page report. We heard that they learn visually, that they learn through storytelling, and that if you can find a way to combine data that isn't just where do we work, but what does the data mean? What is the analysis of the data? What are we doing well? And what are we not doing well? Let's be honest about that. And let's put all of our programmatic data with our financial data, let's put it up. We kind of came up with the idea that we would improve more. We would improve because it's out there. We would become a better organization because we would know how all this starts to tie together, and we would do it in a way that people, not just Water for People, but people outside of Water for People could learn from. We've also been talking to a range of donors about whether this could be sufficient for them over time, and many corporate donors in particular are open to receiving information this way. So we contracted out EffectiveUI to actually do it.
Okay. So our approach on the design side was to really appeal, because in the end, we're all humans, we all kind of appeal to our senses. So whether that be tactile, auditory, visual. So our approach was really to kind of combine both of those, to take a look at ways that we could take a lot of complex data that is custom and be able to present that in a way that is really compelling through data visualization. I just mentioned earlier, we use something called HiCharts, which essentially is a rich JavaScript charting library that just renders graphs and charts. And it allows people to manipulate, or I shouldn't say that word manipulate because people think I don't mean manipulate like have wrong data, but to interact with the data. And then on the other side, there's the human interest side, and there's more the emotive side. And really being able to take donors on a journey to really see the impacts that their contributions are having, not just at the field level, but also looking at it from the beneficiary level and bringing those stories to life. So that was a very powerful, and we believe will be a powerful combination to combine the two.
And Eric, how are you doing that right now? I know you have proving it.
Sure. And our platform was built on two ethos kind of ethical drivers, right? One is we're no longer treating the donor as an ATM, right? If I'm going to approach you for a 10-year grant and I'm only reporting in a 6-month, 12-month cycle after funds are dispersed, what really is that, right? International development is damn hard, right? There's huge ebb and flow, plateaus, valleys that donors never actually get to see. So what we've done is we've made all our reporting go live. There is no firewall, and we're trying to avoid that very data puke. That's going to become a term that just kind of rolls through the water sector. And in doing so, we've really struggled with our platform, right? We're trying to emulate what Net has done with Reimagine Reporting. But again, the key ethos is that we are not treating donors as ATMs. We're trying to treat them as investors. And then most specifically for our program staff, we're trying to show data trends in real time. Right? I saw someone this morning say that they would collect the data, they'd send it back to HQ, HQ would analyze it, send out the data sets and the trends back to the field. What is the turnaround time on something like that? So proving it is based on two primary kind of drivers. Reimagining how we deal with donors for the long term, and then how our program staff actually absorbs information about our projects in real time, and then course corrects when we're way off track.
So that real-time element, I think, is important. We talked about how reporting can be tedious, especially annual reports or a report at the end of a program. This kind of just-in-time data for donors, for the organization, is this an expectation that people have now, that the data will be there when they want it? And also, how does this kind of change internally how that data is kind of collected and displayed?
So for us, it's a great question. For us, again, the driver of this platform is actually us. We're the primary market for this. And so as a result, the quicker the information comes through, the more you can update it, the more you can comment on it. From a programmatic point of view, you can do exactly what Eric's talking about. You can sit there and say, this is what we're doing well, and that's great. And this is what we're not doing well. And this is what we're trying to do to address that particular problem. And here's how we're doing in terms of those course corrections. And I think the key is to find that balance between what you were talking about, the visualization and the storytelling. Not storytelling in the kind of, wow, someone got a toilet and now their life is, now they're saved kind of nonsense. But really kind of, what's happening over time, what's working, what's not working, and how do you adjust?
Yep. One other thing I would add is that I believe that Water for People is doing something very, very profound in changing kind of a paradigm shift for how nonprofits, and particularly for the donor community, really understand and can see how those dollars are being successful and impactful, not just reported on. And much like the private sector, we work with both nonprofit and private sector. Many of you, shop at, say, Amazon. And Amazon really, I think, it has set the bar in terms of user experience for retail. And so now people in retail have that expectation that they're going to have an efficient, effective, meaningful shopping experience and get what they want that's contextual and served to them individually. The same thing with, say, Mint and financial services. So one of the things that we believe is that this platform has a great opportunity to really transform and set the bar for nonprofits, and that other nonprofits are going to have to start being more transparent, are going to have to start providing, more compelling outcomes, and making sure that people are aware of that.
So, as the primary audience for this tool that you're building, it's accessible to the public as well. This is, there's a lot of transparency inherent in this process by building something for yourself and making it available to the public. How do you make it meaningful and explain it in a way that you're designing it for yourself, but are you ultimately designing it for the end user to understand, so it can be easily understood for both audiences?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So one of the things that we've done is our main partners around the world are actually local government partners. And so we're doing a couple things. One is in the next iteration, it's going to be redesigned for cell phones because they use that much more effectively. The other thing is in a couple of local governments, particularly in India and in Honduras, they actually want to use this as their particular district webpage, and they want to add things to it, not just around water and sanitation. The ultimate goal is to do something that Ushahidi did when Kony came out. If you remember Kony, Ushahidi did this really disruptive thing where millions of people were looking at this video of the Lord's Resistance Army and the hunt for the head of that. They created a platform for Ugandans to actually comment on this. And so that's the other thing we're going to do, is we're going to create an opportunity for community members and for people who are running water systems. We're doing an enormous amount of user feedback right now, which will go directly onto this platform, so you can see, part of it is our analysis of what's happening, but independent of us, can we get an analysis from people on the ground about what they think is happening? And I think that's just as rich, if not more.
That's awesome. I think presently, right, you have 3 ways of analyzing an NGO right now. You've got our websites, where we put our most compelling stories, our most beautiful videos, our best copy, and a donate button. And then you've got our annual reports, where we've taken those stories from the website, we've sensationalized them a little bit more, and there's a little bit of financials. And then you've got our 990s and our audits, right, where you can tell beyond a shadow of a doubt that we've spent 85% on programs, 10% on management, and 5% on fundraising. Collectively, those tell you very little. Individually, they tell you a microscopic amount. And so I think what we're both trying to do ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's 3 key principles that we actually like to push for with proving it. The first is that we're talking about outcomes, not inputs. If you're in the education sector and the only thing you're promoting is the number of schools you've put in, it's not an outcome, right? What are your long-term outcomes? For us, in particular, we have 3. We want better health and development for the communities we serve, we want local ownership, and we want theft. All those things are trackable. Theft just means that people are taking our model, they're stealing it, they're doing it better than us, and they're kicking our ass, ultimately, in that job. Local ownership talks about supply chains, distribution, local maintenance, government buy-in. It's trackable. Better health and development, you're talking about clean water that lasts, sanitation that lasts, hygiene that lasts, and a population increase over time. It's trackable. So again, talking about outcomes. Secondarily, that you're tracking them over time, because it's easy to show that first picture of a child drinking water, right? Day of inauguration, anyone can do that. That's the easy work. That's when the project actually starts. But you have to track over time. And third, and I couldn't agree more with Ned on this, is real user reviews, constituent feedback. Everything else is an echo chamber, right? Our websites, our annual reports, our financials, even the data sets we give you, that's an echo chamber of us telling you how cool we are in hopes that you tell other people how cool we are, and it cycles back to us. It's the real user reviews that is the absolute key. I don't think that anyone's gotten right thus far.
And speaking kind of about the outcomes, you know, trying to combat data puke or prevent data puke, I don't know how exactly you would, how do you interact with data puke, I guess is the question. But you can't. So how do you prioritize, you know, what to show? How do you make those decisions? I mean, starting with outcomes-based is obviously a good way to do that. How did you do that?
So it might be useful. Do you mind if I show it? Because it'll be useful to, so if we can do the second video, that would be great. And just a real thanks to the Case Foundation. They were the intellectual and initial investors in this program. So this is the platform and what it looks like. And the key is to understand these circles. So Water for People has a program called Everyone Forever. And you can see around the world we're getting coverage up, but not so much in terms of the forever side, the sustainability side. So you can click into a particular country, like Honduras. You can see our results in terms of your question. What's going well in terms of coverage? How many people are covered? How good is that coverage? Then you can see about sustainability, which is really around financing, operation and maintenance, water resources, a whole range of things that need to be in place to get to keep water flowing. What we also have is sanitation, so you can again see the results. There's video. So these videos are reflections on what's going well and what's not going well and what we should do differently. There's a whole range of kind of checks up above. This is going really fast, sorry. This is the financial part, which is really cool, so you can see where our money's going and who's putting in what money. You can see that at a country level, and then you can go down to a district and see the same thing. So you can see how are they doing in terms of coverage, how are they doing in terms of sustainability indicators. And then what I like here is there are lots of different contributors to the program. So government's putting in money, communities are putting in money, Water for People's putting in money, and you can see all that, and you can actually drill into it. So what it does is it allows you to see the programmatic data and what our analysis of that is. You can get videos and infographics that show what it suggests to us. You can then dig into the money side and see what is it actually costing to get these results and how are we dispersing it, including how much money are we spending on staff, how much money are we spending on offices and vehicles and things like that. And the argument we're making is this is the full financial contribution from us, from government, from local private sector, and from communities that's getting this result. And what we're using it for is, do we need to shift our funding to get a better result? And if we did, does that actually lead to a better result? Does the data improve over time? Is it going up or trending down? And you'll be able to see all of that. That was done very fast, but does that make sense?
So Rebecca, what are some of kind of the practical considerations in creating kind of a data dashboard like this and making it a good user experience?
Yeah, there's a few. And kind of going on what Ned said earlier, I think it's really important that you take a step back and you really understand who you're designing this for. In this case, there's a lot of different audiences. You know, you've got, as Ned said, the local governments and officials. You've got, you know, beneficiaries to some extent. You have the field staff and the donors. And they all have competing interests in some cases and needs. So it's really important to realize that you've really got to understand not just who these people are, but the context in which they're going to use this application. You know, what scenarios are those, I think I mentioned 4 groups, what scenarios are those 4 groups going to be going through on a daily or weekly basis in order to accomplish their goals, whether it's, you know, decision making around programs, whether it's, you know, more transparency on where funds are being used, or just really understanding what impact is having to a certain region. And you've got a lot of considerations, and what we think is important, and you know, we did this in conjunction, and Water for People did a lot of this, is going out in the field, talking to these individuals, and again, observing them, doing a lot of contextual inquiry. At EffectiveUI, we have that practice, we call it customer insights, and it's critical that that helps shape the design. Because you also have things like different geographic regions, different cultures, You've just got a lot of different things. And then technical considerations. Some people don't have access to computers. Some people are, only have access to a mobile device. Some people, bandwidth is a big constraint. So it's really important when you're thinking about designing, you have to take a lot of that in. And, to say that it's easy is, it's just not true. I mean, it's always very challenging, even when you have very talented people coming together. And it's really just making sure that you leverage those insights to help make the right design decisions. One other thing as well, it's not just about getting that up front. It's about incorporating that throughout the process. So doing user testing, we had an example where we actually were going to try a certain design treatment. It was kind of like a radar signal, and it just didn't test very well. People were not sure about it. And with some constituents, that resonated just fine, but with others it didn't. So it's important to have an iterative approach and not just look at it like we've got to get it right the first time only. It's always about enhancement, refinement, and iteration.
So through this process and kind of building this tool, what have you learned so far as an organization about reporting, and kind of through the process? Any insights that you can share with everyone else?
I think actually one of the biggest insights is there's an enormous appetite for an alternative to written reports. And that to me was really, we thought that might be the case, but we're actually finding that among donors, particularly corporate donors who want to be seen as a bit more edgy. We've also seen with program officers who are managing our relationships, we're actually finding that they see this as a tool, and we've played around with it with some corporations. They're seeing it as a much more effective tool to explain to their staff what's happening. The other thing that I really like is that the weaknesses of our program, we're actually getting people, other organizations, other kind of role players, other companies, kind of coming in and saying, we've got an idea for that, and it's never a widget. It's not like, hey, you need to buy our water filter. It's more that it's creating a challenge for people to solve. And what I like about the platform, at least the way we're using it and the staff are using it and the partners using it, is we've had to create a kind of culture, if you will, of it's okay for things not to go well, and for that to be okay. And it's been fascinating to see government officials around the world who most people think would be most resistant to that actually overcome that particular problem and now start to talk about it in how can I do this for ag? How can I do this for education? How can I do this for, for healthcare? Because behind the analysis is a move to actually address the problems. It's not just saying, oh, it's bad, but it's, okay, what are we going to do about it? And now let's go do it. And so there's this sense of movement and constant reflection that to me is very heartwarming because, again, that's the point. The point of what we're doing, we're not going to get it right every time, but the point is are you sophisticated and strong enough to take a look at some bad results and be inspired enough to shift directions and try to do things differently? And I think it's hard to do that if you're just putting bubbles on a map or throwing information out there. It's really the analysis and the thinking through it and linking that with finance. I think that's really important. So we spent this and got this result. Now let's tweak our funding and let's see if we can get a better result. And I think people respond to that.
So this transparency and, kind of laying bare the programs that could work better are helping you as an organization as well. Just kind of this reporting tool. It's a dashboard for you as well. I think we can take questions from the audience now. If anyone has any.
So I think the question.
So the question first, there are two. first we want to go around and answer, what are some organizations that are doing a really great job with reporting right now?
I really like, Oxfam just came out with a whole bunch of their kind of case studies that are excellent, that are looking at, we've been investing in this particular place for a long time, and what have we done? And they're actually very honest and really, really thoughtful. I like that a lot. I love the work of Ushahidi, obviously. I think they do really creative things about getting information out there and making the move towards analyzing it and saying, what does this kind of mean, as opposed to just throwing it out there. I think when they're really good, that's what they're doing really well. I think there's a lot of stuff. I'm part of, I'm really honored to be part of the Stowe Foundation community. And there's some really interesting stuff in HIV/AIDS in particular, a group called Mothers to Mothers. They're doing really interesting things on kind of thoughtful reflection and reporting back and all of that. I don't know if you guys know some other ones. And I know EffectiveUI does some pretty cool things with others.
On the latter portion first, I'm focused intently on constituent feedback, and I still have not seen anyone do that really, really well. It's the hardest piece. I think it's the hardest piece to capture. So hearing you saying that you're doing, user feedback and kind of user-based design of the system is phenomenal. I don't think anyone's done it really, really well yet. To the first part of your question, in terms of crowdsourcing and how do you attribute or show those types of donors how those projects are lasting, I think that's probably where the disconnect with reimagining reporting is for us. We're a much smaller agency, so we are focused on project by project. And for us, again, we've just lifted all the firewalls regarding the reporting coming through, and we've tried to avoid, again, that data puke by really refining exactly what we're measuring and isolating that to just 14 different things that we're measuring. So donors have access to that across the board, and then when someone does donate, we allocate, or we attribute them to a particular project, and then they have donor access to that indefinitely until the project either fails, the community no longer needs it, or the community takes over full ownership.
You want to answer the crowdfunding questions?
Yeah, I think Eric sort of led into it. I'm hopeful that one of the things that happens with this platform is we're able to show that financing actually has to move very differently in the water sector. So the water sector is very focused on, I'm going to do a project. And there's a lot of focus on, not only am I going to do a project, but I'll tell you something about that project. But if you think about it, I live in Denver. Right? And Denver has a really great water utility there that they built long ago, but it costs an enormous amount to keep the water flowing. They have to extend services. They have to do a whole range of things that aren't really like a project. And so what you're going to see with reimagining reporting is actually we invest an enormous amount in things like helping local government draw down money from the Ministry of Finance and use it effectively. That's not a project. And so we do an enormous amount on supply chain development. We do an enormous amount on building up the local private sector and kind of changing incentives and all of that. And so what we're hopeful is by linking our finances and showing where our money goes and looking back. We've guaranteed 10 years post-program monitoring, which is unheard of in the water sector. You're going to see whether those initial investments last, and you're going to see what's actually required financially to keep those systems going and embed them. And so what we're really trying to do, to be honest, is break the view that because someone doesn't have water, the solution is just to pay for that initial hardware. It's actually a longer-term investment, and it's a very different kind of investment, and we're hoping that's what it will show.
Before we take our next question, I think now would be a good time to talk about kind of the long-term plan for reimagining reporting. I mean, this isn't just going to be exclusive to you, right? This is going to be an open platform that other organizations can use.
Yeah, two things. One is last year we collected 24,000 surveys around the world. There's some geocoding in that, so we're taking that out right now. But we're going to make that available because a lot of universities want that data. We just don't want to be able to work through the data and see that there's a woman in rural India who's responsible for $4,000 in a bank account. So we're taking that information out. We'll make that available. The other thing is we've created a partnership with EffectiveUI that we will make this architecture available to anybody who wants it. There's been a lot of back-end stuff. That was one of the main things, again, that the Case Foundation was really helpful on with us. but there was an enormous amount of back-end work. So if you have some combination of programmatic data that you want to analyze, if you have some way to tell a story, if you want to link it with your finances and all that kind of stuff, then the foundations or the architecture is there. And we won't be proprietary or anything on that. We're making it available. Well, I got one clap.
Yeah. Come on. That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.